The Last Word with Matt Cooper on Today FM.
I don't know whether we'll get brought up for blasphemy by repeating what Stephen Fry said on RT's programme, The Meaning of Life, 2 years ago, but here is some of a little bit of which he said, which apparently has so offended one person in Ennis that he made a report to An Garda Síochána leading to an investigation.
Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac. Utter maniac. Totally selfish. We have to spend our life on our knees thanking him? What kind of God would do that? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. On the assumption that there is one, what kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
That was Stephen Fry 2 years ago on RT's The Meaning of Life. Ola Dell, Associate Professor at the School of Law, TCD. Is that blasphemous? And if it is, does that mean we're in trouble for having repeated it on air?
No and no.
Good.
Yes. So, now let's get on with the conversation.
Right. Why would the Gardaí conduct an investigation into that?
Well, a complaint, we understand, has been made, and Section 36 of the Defamation Act does contain a crime of blasphemy. And so if somebody has made a formal complaint that a crime has been committed, the guards have to investigate. The thing is that when they conduct their investigation and conclude it, they will conclude, I am certain, that no crime has in fact been committed.
Why are you certain of that?
The definition of blasphemy in the section is very narrow. There is a very broad defence, a sort of a social benefit defence, and I don't think that the very narrow definition catches what Stephen Fry said. Even if it does, there is plainly a social benefit in conducting a conversation and a debate about God, and a social benefit and conversation in conducting a conversation about the blasphemy offence. So I think that there is absolutely no doubt but that this is not a blasphemous broadcast.
Okay. A couple of people are saying, they want to correct me, saying that the person who reported this didn't say he was offended, merely reported it was a breach of the law.
Well, we don't quite know exactly what he reported. There are the Gardaí are keeping silent on this, as they should, until a decision has been made to send a file to the DPP, and a decision made by the DPP if a file is sent. And after that, we are just speculating. Okay.
Michael Nugent, Chairman of Atheist Ireland. Were you behind this?
No, we weren't, but we're happy.
Because, immediately I suspected, this was a great one to sort of set the cat amongst the pigeons here. Look at the flaws you would see it in the law. Get somebody to stir it up a little bit by throwing in a complaint about it.
Well, no, it isn't. And in fact, but we have already done that. On the day that the law came into effect, we published a series of blasphemous statements in order to challenge the law. We weren't prosecuted, but the fact that they are investigating the Stephen Fry case seems to suggest that the police do seem to think that there is something more there. And I don't think that you can be certain that it won't be prosecuted. Everybody was certain when the pro-life referendum was passed that it wouldn't be used to stop women from travelling to England. Yet the state took out an injunction to stop a raped 14-year-old girl from travelling to England. The difficulty with these theological laws on the civic books is that you never know when somebody is going to decide that the creator of the universe is telling them that they have to protect the creator's feelings from Stephen Fry and implement this absurd law. It's not only is it absurd, it's embarrassing to Ireland internationally. It is cited by Pakistan at the United Nations to support their blasphemy laws, where they execute people. There's a Christian woman awaiting execution in Pakistan for blasphemy against Muhammad at the moment. And the Prime Minister of New Zealand has just said today that this has brought to his attention that there's a blasphemy law in New Zealand that he wasn't aware of, and he's going to get rid of it. And he thinks people in New Zealand would be astonished if what happened in Ireland was happening in New Zealand. That man, by the way, is a social conservative, rural, practising Roman Catholic. So that's what the international view of our blasphemy law is.
OK, back to you on this, Owen O'Dell. We have another guest I'll get to in a moment. A listener says, I can't wrap my head around this Stephen Fry nonsense. He was asked an opinion, he gave it, and it's an opinion in line with that many hold. But are you allowed to express an opinion if the law believes it to be blasphemous?
It's not so much the fact of the opinion that the law is trying to get at. It is that you must be saying something grossly abusive or insulting by matters held sacred by a religion, intending to cause outrage amongst the substantial numbers and causing outrage amongst substantial numbers of the religion. It's a very, very high threshold. I have to say, I agree with Michael that for so long as this law is there, it allows for madnesses and oddities and embarrassments. I didn't say that he wouldn't be prosecuted. What I said was he wouldn't be successfully prosecuted, but I don't think that Stephen Fry would be prosecuted either. But the sooner it is gotten away with, the better. And the Constitutional Convention said so, recommended so 3 years ago.
But Owen, sorry, isn't this a 21st century law? This isn't something harking back to the 19th century or even the 20th century, is it?
Well, it is.
I thought there was a 2009 law that brought...
It's a 2009 legislation, but it goes back to a Supreme Court decision which said that the Constitution in 1937, which referred to blasphemy, required an offence of blasphemy on the statute books. And the reason why the Constitution in 1937 refers to blasphemy is because of considerably older, the archaic sort of religious laws that you're talking about and that Michael is talking about. So the Supreme Court told us about 20 years ago that there's a gap, and in the 2009 Act, the Minister for Justice decided to fill the gap. And the way to get rid of it is to change the Constitution so the Constitution doesn't require this legislation anymore.
Well, what the Supreme Court was talking about back then was there was a law on the books, which was in the 1961 Defamation Act, and the Supreme Court found that it wasn't enforceable because it didn't define what the offence consisted of. So exactly. what Dermot Ahern was doing in 2009 was trying to make it enforceable. He's trying to create the impression now today in a couple of interviews that he was trying to dilute it. Actually, he wasn't. There was a law there that wasn't enforceable. He made it enforceable. And the difficulty it has is not just whether it's technically enforced by the police, but it has a self-censoring effect on media outlets who understandably, with the exception of courageous people like Matt here, who has handed himself into the police by playing this earlier on today, most media outlets aren't interested in getting into legal arguments about whether they're committing blasphemy because they're running businesses. They don't want to even run the risk of being involved in a case like that. We have personally had articles dropped from media outlets, have been told before live broadcasts on certain stations not to breach this blasphemy law. So it has a self-censoring effect even if it isn't formally enforced.
A listener says it's like something out of the life of Brian when your man was getting stoned. As it happens, we actually played the clip last Thursday during our movie spot from the life of Brian, which of course was banned when it was released by Monty Python in 1979, and it wasn't until years later that the Irish Film Censor lifted the ban here in this country. We have another guest with us, Dr. Ali Salim of the Islamic Cultural Centre. I hear you're in favour of our blasphemy laws here in Ireland. Why so?
And what's wrong with this? Well, I'd say, Ireland has rapidly become a multicultural and multi-faith society. Well, this upheaval gave platform to the existence of diversity of religions and ethics of various communities who have chosen to make Ireland their home. In Ireland, for many people, religion has a great value. It is of an indispensable significance for every and each believer. In a world where tragedy is the norm, religion gives us reason and gives us purpose. And that is for many people residing in this country. Yes, if religion does not mean anything for many people, then there is a need for legislation that regulates relations among those who see it something significant and those who see it insignificant.
Okay, but religion is a personal choice. So why should
it... Well, then allow me to have it as a personal choice. Then do not cross it.
In what way?
Well, nobody asks anybody here to share others' faith, but just at least do not violate what I believe to be holy.
But Ali, you're violating other people's beliefs that freedom of expression is as important to them as your beliefs are to you.
Well, I am a great advocate of freedom of expression. Freedom of expression, if expressed reasonably or if expressed responsibly, just like any other social exercise, if you practice responsibly, it will be welcomed. But if freedom of expression turns into aggression, then it is not welcomed, and just like any other social exercise.
Ali, do you think that Pakistan should execute Asia Bibi for blasphemy against Muhammad?
Well, I'm talking about Ireland here.
I know, but I'm asking you about that particular one because they're using the Irish law as part of the justification for their law. Do you think that Pakistan should execute Asia Bibi?
I don't think any country should be inspired by the legislation of any other country.
Yeah, but do you think that Asia Bibi should be executed?
Just let me finish this, please, because every country has its distinctive characteristic and social context and also cultural context. In light of that, every country is to look and consider and see what is good for itself to take the decision or otherwise.
Hold on, can I ask you, Dr. Ali Saleem, is there any circumstances in which you think any country should execute a person for blasphemy?
I'm not a legal expert, to be honest with you.
No, I'm not asking you for a legal opinion. I'm asking you, as a practicing, as the head of the Islamic Cultural Centre, as a member of the Islamic Cultural Centre, but as a person who professes the Islamic faith, do you believe it is appropriate to kill or execute people who you believe have blasphemed?
I think people can be prevented from practicing blasphemy in a number of ways, and people maybe they should not be the tough. To the extent of executing people who practice blasphemy. But I think there are a number of issues that alternatives that people should apply.
If you fail to prevent them, are there any circumstances in which then you believe people should be executed?
I don't think if you fail to prevent somebody from practicing something, then you terminate his life like that. I think you should execute many alternatives, and you will never fail to find an alternative that would prevent people from practicing something that you feel is blasphemous.
What about the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, which of course led to that appalling murderous massacre in Paris a couple of years ago? If such cartoons were published in Ireland, would you think they should be covered by our blasphemy laws?
Well, of course I think they should be covered by blasphemy law.
Michael Nugent?
And what do you think should be the punishment?
Well, the punishment should take them to court, you see, and then let the authorities look after them.
Okay, so in that context then, would you be prepared to support the current campaign to have Asia Bibi released from the execution penalty?
I'm not really aware of the case that you're talking about.
Okay, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it then. She was gathering fruit with co-workers. She went to get some water for her co-workers, and they told her that because she was a Christian and she had drank from the water, that she had sullied the water. And she said,
God, this is obnoxious. Who said that? I totally disagree with this.
Yeah, well, this is a high-profile case. Atheist Ireland and the Evangelical Alliance of Ireland and the Ahmadiyya Muslim community of Ireland, who I'm sure you're familiar with, are jointly going over to Geneva when the UN is questioning Pakistan about the Asia Bibi case and other human rights abuses in July.
Well, I tell you,
we would welcome your support in campaigning against that.
If I saw this lady, I will be the first person to fill whatever pocket she's having and hand her the water with my own hand, and I will be delighted to do that, you see. And that's the real understanding of Islamic theology.
So you'd be happy to support our campaign to not have her executed?
Oh, of course, you see, I wouldn't agree with something like this. You see, like somebody going to drink some water and then you execute him for doing that. This is nonsense.
Okay, can I go
we'll
back
be in
to you,
touch with you about that, and maybe we'll work together on it.
O'Nodell, it interests me. I think there were certain Irish publications did actually publish the Charlie Hebdo cartoons after the massacre in Paris. Others actually decided not to do so because they were afraid of causing offence or possibly afraid of retribution from terrorists. But would they have broken any law in Ireland if they had published those cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad?
No, for the same reasons that Stephen Fry hasn't committed blasphemy in his broadcast either. The reason why the Irish newspapers that did republish those cartoons did so was for reasons of political debate, the kind of political debate about the nature of society, the nature of speech, the nature of religion that we're having now, and that will always be a defence under the current Irish legislation. The mere fact, however, that somebody like Elise Salim could have called at that stage for the prosecution of any newspapers that republished the cartoons, the fact that somebody could complain about Stephen Fry and what he said on the television 2 years ago, the fact that you opened half in jest but whole in earnest, are we going to commit blasphemy here? Those are good reasons to remove the constitutional offence of blasphemy and to repeal the section of the Defamation Act.
Okay, can I ask as well, even if you were to say that you do not believe God exists, that you do not believe that the Prophet Muhammad ever existed, would that be regarded as blasphemous, Owen?
Not so far as the law is concerned. However, various religions will say that denying a central tenet is blasphemous, and there are old cases in the 1600s, 1700s, early 1800s where atheism was held tantamount to blasphemy, but under our current legislation it wouldn't be.
Okay. Dr. Ali Salim, if I was to say to you that, you know, God does not exist, that the Prophet Muhammad never existed, would you regard that as blasphemous?
Of course, you're entitled to say that. If you don't want to believe, if you believe they do not exist, it is entirely your business, of course.
But it doesn't make it blasphemous, does it, to say
it doesn't. No, it doesn't, of course, you see. And I totally agree with what the other guest said. That this is not blasphemous, of course, and people have the right to believe, to choose to believe or not to believe, and basically lead their life on the basis of that. However, just back to the point, the ex-speaker mentioned that to abrogate the blasphemy legislation that we're having at the moment. Look at the United Nations Declaration with regard to human rights. It was ratified by all the countries all over the world. But in spite of that, we still have more than 1 billion adults who are illiterate, and that the only reason for that is that the United Nations Declaration did not have the force of law to execute this declaration in every country. Until very recently, we could see Mandela marching and so many other people marching for equality and no for racism and all of these things, in spite of the Declaration of Human Rights. The only reason for that is that these things happen because the force of law does not exist.
Okay. We're going to leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Salim from the Islamic Cultural Centre, Owen O'Dell, Associate Professor at School of Law, TCD, and Michael Nugent, Chairman of Atheist Ireland.
The Last Word with Matt Cooper on Today FM.